You're listening to the Beyond Sundays podcast. Each week we talk to people just like you from all over the world who share stories of God's faithfulness. Today you're going to hear from 3 incredible women who are going to do just that. We do want you to be aware that part of this conversation actually happened via Zoom because one of us was joining the conversation all the way from Washington, D.C. So you will hear some delays in the conversation as we go back and forth, and that's just technology. I mean, there are delays. We're thankful for it, but we also have to deal, right? Also, this episode is longer than usual. Turns out when you invite more people to the conversation, well, there's just more to say, and I love that. So let's get to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Beyond Sundays podcast. I am so excited for today's conversation because I have friends with me in the studio today. I have Faith Hoff, who is a longtime BFF of mine and just a sweet, sweet, sweet friend and partner in ministry, honestly, because we've been doing ministry side by side in a lot of different places for quite a bit. So Faith, I'm so excited you've joined us today.
Thanks for having me.
We also have 2 special guests with us today. We have Tori West.
Hello.
Hello, Miss Tori, and McKenna Hammack.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me.
So this is the first time we've ever done this, but we're actually doing a podcast through Zoom. So I want to go ahead and give a really big shout out to all the people who've helped make this happen because I definitely didn't know how to do this. And so I want to thank Molly Lee and also Nick Gonzalez for helping us get to this point of being able to produce this audio through Zoom and have this conversation, because right now McKenna is actually not in Abilene. She's in the capital.
All the way from our nation's capital.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much for making time today. Thank you all for making time today for this conversation. So why don't y'all give us just a brief story? Like, who are you? What do you do? Tell us about family, and I'll let Tori go first.
Okay. I'm Tori. I am currently a stay-at-home mama. Lucas and I have a 3-month-old baby girl. And so I'm just now transitioning from working full-time and going to school full-time to being at home full-time. And yeah. What else would you like me to
That's awesome. Okay. Oh, and she's a cute baby girl. My word. She's adorable.
I think so too.
She's adorable. Well, McKenna, tell us a little bit about you and where you're at and what you're doing.
Yeah, so thanks again for having me. My name is McKenna, and I did grow up in Abilene. I was a part of the Beltway community and youth group and also in the college ministry. And I'm really thankful for just the foundation that Beltway helped laid. And you'll hear a little bit more about that in the rest of the podcast. But I moved to Washington, D.C. about 2.5 years ago for some work. And I kind of got stuck up here in a good way. God's calling tends to be like that. So it's been amazing, though. It's been 2 of the most incredible years of my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything else. So yeah.
That's awesome. What have you been doing specifically up there? Could you go into a little bit of detail?
Yeah. So the work up here is primarily just doing government advocacy for international religious freedom. Basically, that means we're just trying to work with the U.S. government to try to protect Christians and religious minorities around the world who are being persecuted for their faith. And so it's something that hits really close to home, especially as we talk through this conversation about missions and everything. You'll kind of see how God has used that to overlap in my life for sure.
That's awesome. That's incredible. Faith Hoff, you have a sweet baby girl too.
I do. She's almost a year. It's crazy. So I am married to a wonderful man named Gray, and we have a little girl named Evelyn, and I'm also now a stay-at-home mom. I used to work at Beltway a year ago, and then I had her, and so I felt like the Lord told us to stay at home and invest in her, and loving every moment of it. She's so cute and so fun.
She is very cute. Very
She's almost
cute.
Walking. She took 2 steps yesterday.
Oh, go baby girl. We're all in shock right now about that. We're all in shock with that right now. Well, that's incredible. Well, this conversation, what I really wanted to ask y'all about was several years ago, the Lord impressed upon you, Tori, and you, McKenna, you had a heart and a passion for global ministry and for those that were in impoverished countries, and you started a ministry called Baba's Glory. Could y'all tell us about the beginning of that, and where were y'all in that season, and how did that come about?
Yeah, for sure. So Baba's Glory, man, has it been just a wild story of God's provision and faithfulness. For those who may not know, Tori and I started this nonprofit when we were in high school. That was really birthed out of a mission trip that we took to South Africa. And just like Sarah said, God gave us just a really deep heart for missions, for helping others, and helping those in poverty. And when we started out, we kind of had just this idea of what we wanted it to be. But over the years, God really formed it into just his thing. And that's kind of what I've learned too, is just, these gifts that he's given us and these dreams that he's given us, it's all his, and it's all for his glory. And that's behind the name of Baba's Glory, because Baba means father in Swahili. So the Father's Glory. And we work primarily in Arusha, Tanzania, and take short-term mission trips there every summer with a small team of young adults. And I've just really created a relationship with the local village there that we try to help out every year and do outreaches and ministry there. So when Tori and I started it, I think I always laugh about this because we weren't legally old enough to actually start a nonprofit. And so our youth pastor from Beltway at the time, Joel Wood, actually had to sign off as our director and founder because we couldn't have it in our name. And so it's just really humble beginnings. And I'm just so grateful for the leaders that were there to help us.
That's incredible. How old were y'all at that time when the Lord impressed this on your hearts? Were you
I was 16 and McKenna was 17.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. And how many times have y'all gone back?
I think now it's around 8 is the recent count. We just got back from a trip in July. So it's really fresh on my mind and just the ministry that God's been doing there. It was a really awesome trip, and I can't wait to share more about it.
Yeah. Well, you say that your vision is ultimately, you want to share the Father's love globally and share the gospel with every single individual that you encounter on your trips. But strategically, you're looking at areas where believers are persecuted or unheard people groups that they might exist in those places. And that is that vision and that mission is huge. So how have you seen the Lord provide opportunities for you for that mission to actually be walked out in the different trips that y'all have gone on?
Yeah, I think I can speak to that too. That is really the heart, at least for me personally. And I know Tori has her heart as well from the Lord, but I feel like the Lord has given me specifically a heart just for the persecuted church. And that kind of speaks into my day job here in DC. But I feel like that is the passion that God has given me, and really where I hope that Baba's Glory is able to do one day is to strategically help victims of persecution around the globe. Just because we see that Christian persecution is on the rise, and just attacks against Christian communities is happening everywhere across the globe. And I hope that one day Baba's Glory will be able to replicate some of the ministries that we're doing in Tanzania to other countries where persecution is more severe, and just to continue spreading the gospel despite what's going on around us or what the situation is happening. What's happening.
Yeah. I mean, this is a huge, huge mantle and mission that y'all are both carrying. You also have lives beyond the mantle of mission and mission work. You have lives here, in Abilene or in DC. McKenna, you've talked about that a little bit, and Tori, you've talked about your season as well. And just thinking about that mantle, looking back, how have you seen the Lord provide, resources and things for those trips that maybe you were asking, and you were on the floor asking the Lord for things, and you saw him come through and saw him provide in those places, because he is faithful. We do know that about our God. And when we carry things that are big, we need a really big helper, and we have a helper in him. So could y'all go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I could share maybe 2 stories that come to mind. The first is when this all started, when we were in 8th grade and went on our first mission trip, we both came home with this, like, we're going to move to Africa as soon as possible. And our parents were both like, no, we are not going to do that. And I think even if you know both of our parents, I think just seeing the way that God has worked through our parents' hearts and helping them to trust in him even more with us, I think that has been a huge journey that we've both been on with our parents. So I don't know. I think even God just providing faith and hope and joy and support in our parents' hearts has been like a miracle and a blessing in itself. And then I also am thinking about, in high school, a way that this was lived out was doing a lot of missions with Beltway. I think every summer and every spring break, we were doing some sort of mission trip with the youth group, which is where we learned, honestly, so much about loving God, loving people, really like living this mission out specifically overseas in other nations. But when we were in college and we started going to Tanzania, the very first time we went, we were specifically going to go to a place called Morogoro in Tanzania because it had the highest population of orphans. And so we had this whole trip planned. We were working with an organization there. And then the day before we left, the organization said that there was an emergency and we would no longer be able to come. And there wasn't really much of an explanation beyond that.
Wow.
So here we are about to go to Tanzania for 3 weeks and no one is picking us up from the airport anymore. And we're freshmen in college, I think, is when that was. And so we are about to be freshmen in college. This was the summer before our freshman year. And so we are both praying, like, what are we supposed to do now? And both just felt peace, like, I think we're supposed to still go.
Wow.
So we start reaching out to a couple different organizations in Arusha, and we left America without knowing if anyone was picking us up from the airport. It might have been a little bit foolish. I don't know. But we had reached out to a few people and we're really, really just trusting God with that. So we get to, I think London was our layover. We check our emails and someone had responded, the YWAM base in Arusha responded, yeah, we'll pick you up. Excited to meet you and welcome you. So we're like, okay, we have someone picking us up. That's good. So we get there and it's really crazy because now that's YWAM and some of their partners are some of our biggest partners and has been the way that we've gotten to know all these other villages and leaders of these villages that we're working with now. So just you talking about like, how have you gotten there? We've tried and I feel like we've said our best yes, but definitely God has been the one to open the door and to provide the steps that we're supposed to take. Even sometimes when maybe we get in our own way, I feel like God has over and over and over, been faithful to provide the next step that he's asking us to take. And then I think McKenna probably has more examples that she could share of just like practical things, maybe for some of the short-term trips that God has had to provide over and over again.
Yeah, yes, it's very, very fresh on my mind with this past trip. We had just some things before with, I think leading a team of 15 people and creating all the logistics for it and buying flights and getting visas and all of that. I'm sure you guys are both aware of that as people who've led mission trips before. But it just is a lot of logistics and a lot of little details. And then especially in this era of like COVID requirements to get into countries, we had issues there and a team member's visa was denied the day before we left and just things that I remember calling Tori before this trip and was like, Tori, I don't know what to do. I'm at the end of my rope and there's nothing physically left in my own human capacity that I can do. But I really feel like, number one, it was a learning opportunity and a strengthening opportunity for me to just really trust and rely on God on full dependency. And then number two, it was a way for him to show off his glory and show off his provision. And sometimes when we if we try to do it all on our own or we try to fix it all and don't leave room for him to show up, then we rob him of that. And I think that was just such a faithful reminder on this trip. And it was one of our best ministry trips as far as like the things that we got to see and the ways that God showed up, because I think it started at the beginning of the trip from a place of like, God, we're in full dependency of you because we can't do it on our own.
That is so good. I mean, the Bible does tell us that we have everything we need in him. We have everything we need in him. But it's that level of trusting him when we're out on the line. That's scary. That's can be quite, I don't know, just challenging to continue to remember that he is who he says he is, and he will do what he says he will do. Mm-hmm. And when we go out on a limb, he is trustworthy and worthy to be trusted. Mm-hmm. So that's so good. Well, and thinking through how the Lord has provided for you guys specifically in going overseas to Tanzania and to other places, you've traveled the world. You've gone to many different locations and seen a lot of different people groups. And I'm curious as to what have you learned from different cultures and different people groups that you've been able to bring back to your life in the States and in your just normal day in, day out life?
I think people who know me would joke that the thing I've learned is being late to things. I definitely have that. I never know what time it is. I'm usually a little bit running late. But I really think I feel like we've learned a ton. One thing that has really stuck with me and that I continue to be amazed by is just the slower paced lives that a lot of people in other nations live, really slowing down and focusing on the person in front of them. I feel like a lot of times the temptation in our culture can be to produce as much as you can, as fast as you can, and be efficient. And I think it can lead to really fast-paced, almost like overproductive lives. And it's like every time, I'll just reference Tanzania, for example, every time we go there, it's like this breath of fresh air of like the person in front of me asking me how I am really doesn't care if I talk for an hour. Like, they're going to be here in front of me for an hour because what they value most is the person in front of them, not necessarily like what they can produce and how efficiently they can produce it. So I feel like that's something that there's a book by John Mark Comer called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, I think is the name of it. And he says, just a really small quote in there is, the language of love is slow. And that's something that has really stuck with me because it's so true. Like, I can't love you unless I'm willing to give you my time and be slow in that. And so I think that's something that a lot of other nations, I would say, do pretty well. And I feel like that's something I want to like continue to glean from them.
That's so good.
You've also had that though, since you were, I don't know, I haven't known you since you were little, but in high school, I have a picture of you. I almost sent it to you, of you sitting in Macedonia. We're in Macedonia.
Yes.
And she's sitting in a coffee shop with this random person she met at the coffee shop. If you've ever been to Macedonia, which I don't know why you're going to Macedonia, but they speak Macedonian, which is not a language that any of us know. But I watched you. You did exactly what you just said. And so I think it's really sweet of the Lord to like cultivate something that's in your heart and continue to grow it and continue to expose you to what he's put in the world, to be able to slow down and focus on people and learn how to steward that even better. But it is a gift that's inside of you, if I can speak to that, because I saw it in Mexico too, whenever you're sitting on that bus with that girl, and what that led to in those conversations where you also chose the yes to invest in people. And I feel like the Lord blesses that as we start to steward what he's put inside of us for you in that place. You see it multiplied over and over again every time you go on trips or even in your own life here in the United States, getting to see how he grows this thing that he desires to speak to so many people.
Yep.
Love.
That's good. That's good.
That is so good. What about you, Faith?
Oh, gosh. Can you repeat the
Putting
question?
you on the spot.
I was thinking for them. Can you repeat the
Well,
question?
you've traveled the world as
I
well.
have.
You've gone
With
to so
them
many
multiple
different places.
times.
I know. That's why I loved this little trio. I was so excited to have this conversation. So I asked about, with going to so many different cultures and people groups, what are some things that you remember seeing specifically that those cultures and people groups carried that made a mark on you, and that you're like, we in the U.S. are missing this. I want to bring it home to the people in my life, to now you've got a family, a husband, a daughter. I mean, what is it that you're like wanting to make sure Is it a part of your life and a
you're
part of your
asking
normals?
the real nitty gritty stuff.
I am.
Well, I'm in this process right now of kind of evaluating, like, what are my rhythms? What are our family's rhythms? And reflecting on a trip that I took with my husband right after we got married, and then trips that we've taken with Beltway over the years. And really, a lot of it is what Tori already said, but it's this place of slowing down enough to be present where you're at. To be able to see the people in front of you. And recently, Sarah, you and I just read a book together by Jenny Allen that talks about communities and connectedness. And one of the things that Jenny refers to is this place where in other cultures, they live life side by side next to each other, and they know one another. And that really is, when you look at other cultures around the world, there is a different pace that they have to be able to actually know one another. It's not about the stuff they have. It's about the people that they are and what they can contribute to one another and how they can actually be there for one another. And so I'm marked by that. And I'm also marked this last trip that I went on with my husband to Kenya, just marked by the kindness of God and the way that he reveals his heart to different cultures. I'm fascinated at the fact that he's so kind to reveal himself to us in America in a specific way, but in other cultures, like in the African culture and the Asian culture, there is a different way that they receive the love of God. And as Americans, for us to be able to slow down enough, to be able to think outside of what we've grown up with, to meet those people in their culture and learn how to actually love them like Jesus, not like Faith, but like Jesus, it fascinates me. It humbles me. It makes me want to learn more about the heart of the Father, to keep running in and learn the facets of his heart, not the facets of my heart. You know, he can reveal those facets of my heart to me. But there's something about going into another culture that makes you slow down to think about other people because you're out of your comfort zone. Yeah. And so it's like kind of shocking and jolting. But it's also like thrilling and freeing to see how God shows up. And he does. We just have to sit and be quiet. But I've loved every moment of traveling with these girls and traveling with my husband. You and I got to go to Ireland together.
Yes, we did.
So I have traveled with all of you. This is fun. I have some fun stories if we wanted to like go sideways.
I'm okay with going sideways.
Do you guys still pack the way you used to?
This is the wrong turn.
Oh, wait, now I must know. Everyone's going to want to know.
Y'all want to go, or do you want me to say? I have a vivid memory in Macedonia. This was our first mission trip we ever took together. It was Macedonia. And we're sitting in this, like, I don't know, it was a hostel or a hotel thing. Hostel. And literally the night before, we're on the floor, and McKenna is trying to figure out how she's going to put everything back into the suitcase. It's like, it's a miracle that everything is in the suitcase. And then they just unpack like they live there. And so there's literally everything everywhere. Yep. And you have to get it back in.
Right.
And the question is, can you actually get it back in? Uh-oh. And at midnight, before you're about to board your flight the next day, is not a great time to pack and figure out if it's all going to fit. There was a lot of like moving things around and putting in other people's suitcases. So.
Yeah, and you have that weight limit too that you have to.
Yeah, that's always in question.
Yeah.
Is this still happening?
Yeah, tell us.
I'm just a big souvenirs girl. I love to bring home local artifacts and things, and I just can't help it. It's how God made me. So.
Oh, I love it.
And safety things.
Yes.
Well, McKenna, what about you? What are some things that you've brought, aside from the things fitting back in your suitcase that you've brought back with you to the States, what are some other pieces in regards to the cultures that you've been a part of, that you've seen, that you've been invested in? What's changed your life when you've seen the family of God in other cultures and the way that they live their lives?
Yeah, I think all of you can probably relate to this as well. But anytime I've traveled overseas, I've just always come back with the impression of just how hospitable other cultures are. They will take the shoes off their feet to give them to you if you need them. And in the context of like living in DC, as you guys are probably well aware, it's a very polarized city because everything here has to do with politics and with government. And a lot of the times there's this just this agreed upon thing that you don't let the enemy or the other side into your home. But whenever we go to Tanzania or anywhere, I mean, they could care less who you are, where you come from, what you believe. They truly just slow down and focus on you and just invite you into their home and give you anything that they have. And I think about this one story when I took a mission trip to Indonesia with Beltway. And we were actually with a Muslim family who was observing Ramadan, and they were about to break their fast. And they invited us into their home to break the fast with them. And to them, it didn't matter at all that we were Christians and that they were Muslims. And it didn't matter at all that this may have been, the only food that they had for the night. But they were willing to give us anything to just make us feel welcomed. And it's just an interesting and good perspective for at least me in my mind to help keep my heart soft when I find myself putting up walls between me and the other side, or, in our lives, everyday lives, not just in politics, but between other religions or even, cliques or different things that, distract us from living in unity and living in community with others. I just always think back to this radical hospitality that I hope to practice in my everyday life.
That's beautiful. Well, thinking about, y'all have all kind of mentioned rhythms and things that you've brought back home, and y'all are all of y'all are in different seasons than years gone by, and the stories that we've been talking about, when Bob Boscoe first started, our first mission trips, or y'all are all in new seasons. And so how are those rhythms? How have they changed? What are they? What do they look like as far as where you're at right now? Can you go into a little bit about that, just in context of not operating from a place of worry, right? But from a place of everything's provided, like the Lord is going to provide, and not in a sense of our mind being so restless, but in a sense of our mind is at peace because we know who is king. So with that awareness, because y'all, I know you walk in that every day. You all walk in that identity as a daughter every single day. I witness it. So can you go into maybe what are some rhythms and some practices that you have personally in your life that help you stay in that place of knowing who you are and whose you are?
I'll go first. Okay, I don't know if this is exactly like the answer you're looking for. So
you know
stop
what?
me
You just
if you
go
need to.
for it.
I think I'm still very much in a place of learning new rhythms. I feel like the first couple months of having your first baby, you're learning a lot.
Everything changes.
Everything has definitely changed.
And they need everything.
Yes. But recently, Lucas and I, my husband and I, have been going through this thing. It's called family teams. But actually, it really helps you establish rhythms in your family life. And so kind of where I'm at personally right now, this is just like a little bit of what my weekly rhythms look like. In the morning, up until lunchtime, my only two goals are connecting with God and connecting with my daughter, because she's the only one at home with me. So I take time to not feel like I need to clean the house or answer my phone or do anything productive necessarily, besides making sure I feel connected to her as her mom, and then making sure I feel connected to God. So a lot of times, she wakes up around 7, I feed her, I do the Bible recap is kind of the way I help myself go through the Word. And so I start with that, have good playtime with her, and then when she goes down for a nap, then I have more time with the Lord, whether that be journaling or reading more or worshiping. But I think having that time in the morning where I don't feel like I have to, I guess the word that comes to mind is produce something. In this season, like as a mom, it feels, and being at home, it's like, oh, that must be very relaxing. But there's really like a never ending thing never-ending list of things that you really could be doing and I think feel like you should be doing. So at first that was very overwhelming to me because I used to have, from this time to this time I'm at work and that's what I'm doing, and then this time to this time I'm at school and that's what I'm doing, but then having kind of this day of, okay, how do I iron out my day so every day is not like starting from scratch, I have no idea what I'm doing and feeling restless.
Right.
And knowing that what God needs from me is my heart. Mm-hmm. And that when I get to operate out of a place of connectedness with him, even if that takes me all morning to really get to that point of feeling like I'm able to like abide in him right now, that's what he desires most out of me. And ultimately I'm able to be more productive and more loving, walking in the fruits of the Spirit later on in that day when I have that. So that's like, and then in the afternoons, then I do things that are productive for our house and marriage and all those things. But
the to-do list.
Yeah, the to-do list. And that
they don't go away.
They don't go away, yeah.
But they also don't get the front seat.
Right.
The driver's seat. They don't get to drive the day.
Yeah, because it can be easy to wake up and just, oh my goodness, this is my to-do list and I have to start. And yeah, that was not helpful for me.
What about you, McKenna?
Yeah, I think it is really sweet to see like the very different seasons of life that Tori and I are in, and Faith and Sarah, all of us are in. And I think Tori said it exactly true, that it's about the heart and about the obedience to God. And that will look so different for everyone at every stage of their life. And it looked very different for us in high school than it does even now. But for me personally, I really think what I'm having to learn in this season is just discipline, to find true rest, because I think also that we sometimes think that we will get rest from doing things like, just sitting on the couch and watching Netflix, or, X, Y, or Z, just physically resting. But what I've been learning and trying to create good habits in is the types of rest that fill us. And that's, your spiritual rest. So spending daily time in the Word, or, taking time even out of the busy schedule of the workday to just try to have like intentional worship time with the Lord. And then also other things that aren't focused solely on work. And this has been a really fun one because I've always loved to do things that are really creative, or things that involve like music and art and things like that. And sometimes when all I'm doing day in and day out is like research and writing and legal jargon and all of that kind of stuff, I feel like it becomes just a task rather than something that I enjoy. And I've recently felt just this call from the Lord to pick up the discipline of doing things that are creative on the side as something that I enjoy and that is pleasing to him. And that is, in a way, it's still worship.
Yeah.
To him. And so, yeah, it doesn't always get done. I'm definitely not perfect at it, but as I grow in discipline in some of these different things I've tried to be intentional with, I've just found myself feeling so much more at peace and so much more just confident in him that he's going to show up in my day-to-day life, regardless of the chaos that's around me or the crazy schedule of my day. So yeah.
Well, I can imagine just thinking through the culture of DC specifically, which is probably a good representation of literally the United States, because it is our capital. But just the busy, go, produce, which is something Tori mentioned earlier. And just that is a very natural thing for us to want to accomplish, to keep going, to keep pushing, to keep trying, to keep... I don't know what the word is. It's just like striving. Yeah. From the place of striving rather than from a place of thriving, which in my own story, I definitely had to walk that journey in motherhood when I first became a mom, because it's very easy to just go into that mode of all the things that must be done and all the things that need my attention, because, you want to do your best. You want to be your best. And, just keep going for the things that you want for your family. But specifically in the area of just how you live your day in and your day out life, I'm thinking about the safeguards that we put in place to prevent burnout specifically. But when you're living in the world and not of the world, that looks different. That looks very different from our culture. And so I'm curious, McKenna, if as you've been in DC for 2 years, was there a struggle to not go into that flow of what it looks like for the majority of the culture to strive?
Yes. Yes.
Well, then how did you overcome? How did you overcome all that?
Yeah, it has been, in a way, one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but again, one of the most amazing things that's ever happened to me. And I'm just so grateful that God brought me here. I think one of the hardest parts, specifically just about where I live, just for like context, in this neighborhood called Capitol Hill, which is about like 6 blocks from the nation's capital. And everyone in the neighborhood, and DC is not very big, so kind of everyone in the district is all working in government or politics or something along those sorts. And that's who your friends are. That's who you go to church with. I mean, it's there, both sides of the aisle. And it is difficult sometimes to separate work and like personal life a lot, because there's just networking that goes on all the time. Anywhere you go, it's like, who do you work for? What do you do? Are you my enemy? You know,
wow. Yeah.
things. It's really intense. And then on top of that, you add a level of like being a Christian in a culture that doesn't always respect it. And when I first got here, I had a really hard time being open about my faith, just because of like hurtful things that people would say, or just assumptions people have sometimes about Christians, and just kind of became really just bitter, honestly, about living in the city and about the people here, and just had a really hard heart about my time here, and kind of just wanted to get out as soon as possible. But I think through that, I have found a way to love the people here. And part of it goes back to thinking about who my mission field is here in DC, because it looks very different than what it might look like in Abilene or other places. And I kind of was laughing because I was thinking about, in Abilene, the question is, where do you go to church? But in DC, it's always like, do you go to church, or do you go out? And then they're like, oh, yes. Like, and I'm like, great, we've got a good start. But no, it just looks so different. And instead of holding it as like a grudge or as like a source of bitterness, I've just had to find gratitude. I mean, that's like the number one thing I feel like the Lord has stretched me in to protect, just my mind and my just my peace, is just a gratitude for the things that He's given me here and the opportunities that He's brought. And I think it goes back to living in full dependency on Him.
It's good.
Because even if we are poured out, even if we give everything away, even if we're persecuted, all of these things, like, do we still trust Him to show up? So
That's so good.
Just keep preaching.
She could just keep preaching, both of y'all. You're preaching to all of us. That's so good.
One of the things you guys keep like brushing on, but you haven't said these words, but Leif Heflin actually says it. He says, entering the hard work of rest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And both of you keep talking about these rhythms, and they ultimately come to a place of, am I resting in God? And it sounds like so much of what you've pulled from your experiences, which it's just His grace that you've gotten to experience it since 8th grade, right? Going overseas. But like pulling in this place of looking at all these other cultures and seeing all these other people, but also living in Abilene and getting to experience all that you've gotten to experience even here, and taking all of the wisdom and realizing that there's a place of like rest and not striving that we have to enter into to believe that He is actually going to provide. Like what you said, like gratitude is rest. It's our heart at rest with God. Being able to actually like wake up and like come from a place of like, all God needs from me is my heart, is from a place of rest. It's not from a place of striving. Do you feel like your experiences over the years have like kind of poured in. Obviously, we're talking about like a long amount of time that you're trying to evaluate, but do you feel like all of those experiences you've had over the years have helped get you to this place to be able to operate with God? And is there any like defining moment where it was like, okay, I'm going to stop struggling with him like Jacob, right? Wrestling with him, but actually like receiving and trusting him as provider, that he's going to provide the rest, that he's going to provide and go before you in these trips, in your life, moving to DC, staying in Abilene, the decisions you've made up to now?
I think one thing that comes to mind is when you're talking about like coming from, I think, yes, I feel like it's been a long journey of learning. And I think one of the things that almost like, what's that saying, puts the hammer on the nail, whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
Is when you come to the end of yourself and you're like, I cannot do this, and it brings you back to this place of God, I need you. Realizing that I think that feeling of need for him and that feeling of inadequacy is a gift that does turn our eyes back to him. Recently I was talking to a friend and who also just had her first baby, and she was sharing like, this has always been my dream, is to just be a mom, and now here I am, and it's the hardest thing I've ever done, and I'm feeling discouraged, and I don't know what to do. So I'm like, I can understand, I can relate, and I'm praying for her. And I feel like the Lord gave me this encouragement of, you were meant to be a mom, but you weren't meant to be a mom without me. And I think that applies to so many things in our life when we're saying yes and we're walking in obedience. Like, yes, you were meant to do this. I did call you to this, but I didn't call you to do this without me.
That's right.
And so that feeling of, I can't do this, or I'm striving, obviously that's not the place we want to operate in, but I think viewing that as, this isn't a pleasant feeling, but that's an invitation to turn our eyes back on God and to say, okay, this is hard, but I'm not supposed to be doing it by myself. I need your help.
That's right. And
viewing that as a grace from God to recognize that in ourselves. So I think even just that encouragement from the Lord was a defining moment for me of, okay, when I have days, or maybe this is like at different moments every day, where I feel overwhelmed or discouraged, like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, just remembering that encouragement of, I can do this, but I can't do it by myself. And that's okay. Like, that's good. I'm not supposed to just muster it up and pull it out from within. I have to learn how to rely on God and how to ask God and how to wait on God for it. And then faith, I think what you said, I haven't read Leif's book, but that entering the hard work of rest, the family teams thing has talked about, just phrased that like, it takes hard work to be able to rest. And I think realizing that hearing that phrase really made something click in my mind, because I think I at least had this perception of rest should just be easy. Like, I should just be able to, be at peace or come home and be able to like unplug and feel restful about that. But I found myself a lot of times, like, if I didn't have something to do, feeling like just restless kind of. And I think learning how to enter into the hard work, or doing the hard work to be able to enter into rest, that takes a lot of training your mind. When you're talking about like worry and fear, that it's not easy to make your mind shut off those things, but starting to train your mind like, okay, when this lie comes into my head, I'm going to override it with scripture. And it takes me, a whole month of doing that over and over and over and over again before that starts to become a little bit more natural. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
I love that you said it's an invitation. The agitation is an invitation.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Agitation is an invitation. That's good. Maybe we'll name the podcast that.
Hey.
The episode. Man. Well, and it also too, just thinking about that invitation, is that it's so important to remember that apart from him, we can do nothing. Nothing. I mean, his power is what we're reliant on, but his presence is also what brings peace to our mind and to our hearts and to our days, even if they're busy and full of chaos and, things that must be done. But going through our day, remembering we can talk to him and ask him for the things that we need, and him be so generous with what he has. I mean, we serve an abundant God who is a good giver of good things. And there's just this place of when we remember who we are as daughters or as sons, and that we can approach the Father not just once a week on a Sunday morning, but throughout the week, and take our needs and our cares and our thoughts and our worries and our restlessness, our places of burnout, our places of insecurity. I mean, all the things, anything can be taken to him, because he tells us that his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And he wants us to feel that every single day, every moment of the day. And so I think that that is beautiful, the picture of that invitation to remember in the middle of the day, if there's an agitation here somewhere, it's an invitation in that moment to go straight to the source of life and the giver of it. That's really good. Really, really good. Well, just switching gears real quick before we finish up the episode for today, I want to ask you girls, all of you, just to think real quick about something that you know about God now that you didn't know in a previous season. We've talked about y'all's seasons that you're in right now, and we're constantly growing. We're always growing and maturing as we become more and more and more like Jesus, right? That's the goal. And so we are not who we were yesterday, but we know more about the Father than we did yesterday or in seasons past. So if you've got something that comes to mind, would you mind sharing with us real quick?
I guess a couple of things come to mind. One thing, just with this whole story overall, one thing that I've reflected on is, like, in our season, we get the chance to say yes and be obedient. And the invitation that God gives us today to be obedient is for today, but that might look different in 5 years. So I guess what I'm meaning by that is, in high school, when the whole Baba's Glory thing started, that invitation was there at that time. But if that was given to me now, like, I don't know if I would have capacity for all of that. But because I chose to say yes then and be obedient then, I got to walk in the fruits and that adventure with the Lord. And that same yes and obedience now looks very different than it did in high school. But it's another, like, invitation from the Lord to, like, go on a journey with him. So I guess, like, one thing is just his invitations to us to be connected to him. They don't ever end. You know, it's not like you have this one chance of a lifetime and you can say yes. Like, I mean, that chance is saying yes to Jesus and following him, but there's a daily invitation, a moment by moment invitation to, like, walk with him and live with him. And even just thinking about my little girl, for example, she really can offer nothing. Like, she lays there, she eats, she sleeps, she poops. That's kind of her cycle. But like, the joy that I feel just getting to be with her is, I can't explain it. And thinking about, like, I mean, that'll make me emotional real fast. Thinking about the Lord, thinking about us like that, like, we cannot add anything to God. Like, he is everything. He is abundant. He has everything he needs, but he invites us to have a relationship with him, just to be with him and to say yes to him every day. And it's not about what we can produce or how magnificent our whatever is. It's just that daily obedience, no matter what season of life you're in. If you're in elementary school, if you're in middle school, if you're in high school, college, adult, mom, dad, whatever season, there's always an invitation for you. There's always a place for you at the table to be able to walk with him and follow him. Nothing is too glamorous or not glamorous enough to be worthy for him.
That's good.
Yeah, for me, I would just say it's simple in the way that it's just his realness or his consistency, to just always be there and always show up. And I think it's looked different than I've thought, like, when I was younger, and now that I've, like, been walking with the Lord and growing in my faith, just to see him provide in situations different than that I would have hoped for, or different than I would have maybe even have liked to have happened. He's taken things beyond my wildest dreams or beyond anything I could comprehend in my own human capacity, and just been so faithful to provide. And I think that's the beauty that we can look back on and reflect on when times are hard and when seasons are difficult, and you're not in a season of rest because things are just chaotic. I look back to the testimonies of when he's been faithful in my life.
That's good.
And he's provided, and that gets me through the day, or that is strength for me to keep going, to So yeah, his consistency and his faithfulness is my favorite thing about him.
There's a lot of great things about him. Oh my goodness. Well, this has been an incredible conversation. I really want to thank each one of you for being here and having this conversation. But I'm going to ask one more question, and I would love each one of you to answer it if that's okay. And it is this: what is the most important thing from our conversation today that you hope our listeners really grab hold of?
I think every human being longs to be invited and included. And our God is an includer, and he invites. And the invitation is always there for us to know him as provider, as love, as the one who's constantly dependable. Everything that we need, that invitation is always there. And so I think to think back on this entire conversation, when you go to another culture, when you're right here in Abilene, Texas, wherever you are, he is everywhere, and his invitation is always there. And so being able to realize that there's a simple yes, it's hard sometimes, it's easy and joyful other times, but his desire for you to be invited is always there.
That's good.
That's so good. Yeah, I think mine sort of plays into that as well. Just with Tori and I starting this nonprofit when we were young, we always heard this thing of wow, you guys did this amazing thing when you were young, or you started a nonprofit. That's incredible. But just like Faith said, it's just the simple obedience and the simple yes. It doesn't always have to be something grand, despite what social media or TikTok or whatever, these outside stories that we try to tell, whatever we're trying to say there. God wants our quiet yes, or the things behind closed doors. And to me, when I think about even some of the most inspirational or just courageous people in my life, it's people who made steps of obedience that they didn't think anyone would ever know about. And I just am moved and encouraged by those stories more than I am by the big grand things. And so just walking in obedience, whatever it looks like, even if no one else knows about it, it's just between you and the Lord. And that's always where the most fruit comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be repetitive, but yeah, I think slowing down enough to give him your best yes in obedience, I guess, is what I would what I want to press into and what I would want to encourage, because again, today you get to give a yes that you can't give tomorrow. So being obedient today, I think it matters every day, every yes, every moment, no matter how big or how small, it matters.
That's right. And the Lord blesses the obedience.
Yeah.
And he also blesses just the desire of ours to draw close and to be right next to him, you know, and whatever that looks like throughout our day. Well, ladies, thank y'all so much for joining our conversation today. This has been a joy, and it's been great to catch up and also to talk to you, McKenna, and see your gorgeous face through Zoom.
Thank you for letting me come.
Oh my goodness, y'all are amazing. And I'm going to put the things that we mentioned in the podcast. I'm going to do the whole show notes thing and put the books, the references that we mentioned there, along with some of the other links and things that were mentioned. But if people want to find out more about Baba's Glory and what you guys do and just your mission and partnership and what that looks like, where would they find out more information?
Yeah, you can check out our website or social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook. And we do take short-term mission trips every year and are always looking for people to join us. So just have
when's your next trip?
Next July.
Okay, and where are you headed? Tanzania?
Back to Arusha, Tanzania, yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll put all that information in the show notes as well. And thank you, ladies, so much for joining us. And everyone, just remember, God is the best. And he's just worthy to be praised and worthy to be a part of our everyday. He desires to be a part of our everyday. He desires to show up and show off. And he desires for us to see what he is doing in our day in, day out lives and also around the world. All right, ladies. Well, thank you guys so much. We hope you were encouraged by the stories that were shared today by Tori, McKenna, and Faith. I know I was. I mean, my husband and I, we both pray over our girls every night. Lord, may our girls be world changers. Continue to give them a heart for others. Help them proclaim your name with boldness wherever they go. I mean, it's all for his glory, right? Man, I'm praying for that for my kids and for myself. If you would like more information about Baba's Glory or any of the resources that were mentioned in the podcast, those links will be in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening today to the podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to the Beyond Sundays podcast so you don't miss an episode. We have a new one that drops each week. Also, we really encourage you to share your story with others too. And go ahead and share them with us. I mean, if you've got a really cool story or you know of someone that has a really cool story, we'd love to hear it. And maybe we'll be able to feature them on an episode sometime in the future. Who knows? What we do know is that God is moving. And we hope that today's conversation helps you remember that he's moving in your life too, beyond Sundays.